Hey, welcome to World Entertainment. And the new Resident Evil movie from Weapons director Zach Kriegler is moving forward. Or Krieger. I always say Kriegler. It's Krieger. But he's talking to Deadline now about what the structure of the movie will be. Everything he says sounds good in principle, except you have to take into consideration a few things, which we will get to. But overall, he is saying the right things and does seem to be taking the right approach. And of course, with Weapons doing so well, I think people have a lot of confidence in this guy. Hopefully, it's not one of these kind of Jordan Peele situations where he does a horror movie, everybody all of a sudden goes, he's the horror king, and then the next bunch are all kind of like these weak performing ones. But it says here anyway, Weapons director Zach Kriegler stopped by Deadline's Crew Call podcast, where he shared a few revealing insights about his upcoming Resident Evil film. Kriegler admitted that he's never actually watched any of the various Resident Evil movies directed by Paul W.S. Anderson and starring Milla Jovovich that preceded his project. Now, this is funny when we get into what he says regarding this. And this is where he talks about the structure of the movie and stuff as well. But it's just, there's a little bit of contradiction, which we'll see now in a minute. So that revelation came when he was asked what he might have changed about the era of films. To which he explained, I've never seen a Resident Evil movie. Never seen it. But I've played the games religiously, so I am intimately familiar with Resident Evil as a game franchise. I find it to be inherently cinematic, and there's something about the structure of those games and the pacing of those games that is so thrilling to me. And I've never seen a movie really lean into what those games offer. And so I couldn't comment on what the previous movies do or don't do well, but I can say that I'm excited to make this movie because I love the slow dread that these games naturally exist in, and the idea to be able to make a narrative film with the video game's structure. To me, I can't believe it hasn't happened yet. It feels like the movie should have been made a really long time ago. I'm excited that I get to do it, and with a franchise that's so huge and so globally well respected, it's a real honor to be able to do it. So that's what he's saying, and you can hear him speaking about like the structure of the movie is going to be very much what the games are and the slow dread and stuff like that. Where a bit of contradiction comes into is that he says, I've never seen a Resident Evil movie. You don't know what they do or don't do well, but then he says the idea that something like this has never been made before. It's like, well, how do you know it hasn't been made before if you haven't seen the other movies? It's just, obviously he'd be getting told, but at the same time, that's just hearsay. So it's the case of, for all he knows, maybe they did do that. Now, what I talk about when I said he has to be slightly careful with what the way he's saying about the structure of the game and stuff, is the games are structured in such a way that as a player you really enjoy the structure and what you're doing because you're in control. You are making the decisions. Okay, I want the character to go in this direction, or I want to check out this crate over here or something like that. When you're watching someone play the game, specifically games like Resident Evil, yeah, you can be invested in the story, but the gameplay itself, you're the observer, and sometimes that gets boring. You know what I mean? It's like you're looking at the player moving, you're going, why doesn't he check that cupboard beside him? I'd have checked that. Oh, don't go that way, I'd have gone this way. And why isn't he checking upstairs and all that type of stuff? You know what I mean? If you're making the movie based purely on the way the game plays out in terms of the characters doing it, you have to be careful that you don't end up making the audience, even though we actually would be the observer, you don't want them to feel like the observer. You want them to feel like they're a part of the story. I'm sure he will be able to do that, you know. And then the next question I do have is, which game specifically is he kind of making the structure from? Now, he has said that he wants the movie to be very much based on the first game, which was in the house. But it's when he's talking about the structure and the slow dread throughout all the games, I'm curious as to which game exactly he's talking about there. Is he only referencing the first game, or is he talking about all the other games? Because, yeah, the first couple of games, it is that slow dread type of thing. But the more games you got into, the more kind of action-packed they became, you know. There was more of kind of the onslaught of the infected coming after you rather than just kind of opening a door and, oh, there's a zombie, you know, like when X is going to get you, that type of thing. So I am very curious as to the structure of what he's talking about there in terms of the slow dread and stuff like that. Is it going to be too slow, or will it be a bit more? Because that's the other issue you run into if you're just building up the dread, but you're not putting it in where maybe it should be. That could be an issue as well. But it does seem to be in good hands with this guy. Like, he does seem to understand, more specifically, the games. And that is important when you're adapting a game to a movie. You don't just want to go in there and go, well, we can do what we want, but, you know, we're just going to basically use the brand name, which is pretty much what the original movies did. Like, I remember when that first movie came out, and people were like super excited, and then they watched it and were like, what the hell is this? This is nothing really to do with the game. You know, it's like, where's the house? Where's this? Where's that? Who are all these characters? It made no sense. That movie as well, garbage. I hate them movies. I remember watching it, renting it, and we were like sitting there looking at each other. What the hell are we watching? This is terrible. But I know just people who enjoyed them. And then didn't Alice end up kind of becoming like almost a superhero, and then they took her powers away in one of the movies? I never actually watched the last two movies in that. I know the animated movies that are on Netflix, I believe, they do get a good rep. You know, people seem to enjoy those ones. But of course, it's easier to do a game adaptation via animation because you get to stay a lot more faithful to the games than you have the ability to do with live action. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does with this movie, what people's take on it will be. You know, obviously it's not going to win over every game player, you know, that's a given. It's impossible. You're never going to please everybody. But if he can get the core audience in and be faithful and, as he says, respectful to the core material and stuff, I think he's possibly onto a winner here. And, you know, good things then could happen from there on in. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I can't remember who's actually releasing this movie. I don't think it says anywhere. I can't remember who's meant to be releasing it. I don't think it's coming through Blumhouse. I think it's Warner Brothers, but I'm not 100% sure on that. If you know in the comments, let me know. But overall, what do you guys think of his comments? Do you have faith in him? Do you think he will be faithful to the game? But, you know, again, not too faithful in the sense of you end up starting to feel a bit bored and kind of start knowing exactly what's about to happen. Let me know. And with that, I shall leave it there for this one. So do like, share, subscribe, and all that good stuff. Hit the hype button, let YouTube know these videos are worth pushing. Cheers, and I'll catch you in the next one.